Okay, what are you saying, people? Welcome back to the panel. Rob, it's been a minute, you know?
It's been a minute, bro. It's been a long time, innit? But yeah, new year, new growth, new elevation,
new settings,
meeting new people.
100%.
Know the thing already, man.
Yeah. Listen, so guys, before we kind of get started, just want to say thank you very much for continuing to follow our podcast. You know where to find myself and Rob. You know, you just see it right now, comes up here. The like and subscribe button. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, we're on Twitter. And yeah, just keep supporting. And if you have any inquiries, just email thesocialworkermentor@gmail.com. But enough about me anyway. Let's start with the guests that we've got today. I want to start from this side, from my side. Introduce yourself.
Hiya, I'm Deandra. So I'm a substance misuse counsellor for children and young people.
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm a mental health nurse and I currently work in CAMHS, a Tier 4 service.
Hi, I'm Precious. I'm an assistant psychologist and I work in an early intervention and psychosis service.
Hey, brother, isn't the energy great this morning?
Listen, the professional energy, you know? Look at that. All the accolades that we've got in the room. Flipping heck.
No, man.
Yeah, no.
Listen, ladies, I would offer you a drink or a cup of tea, but next time, yeah, so... One does apologise.
No, I do apologise. But do you know what, Rob? I'm glad that we've got all our professionals here with us.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, this is quite an episode that I've been craving to talk about. CAMHS.
Yeah.
CAMHS. Yeah. Obviously, we know that CAMHS is a service that, you know, social workers, education professionals, many professionals have a lot of involvement with CAMHS. But it appears that there's a lot of backlog and many children and young people that we have been working with, whether, you know, they're known to social services or not, or to, you know, in schools, they're actually not getting the services because of the backlog. And it's just about us professionals being able to kind of dissect what is going on with the CAMHS service. What's happening? What's happening with CAMHS?
All right, well, okay, so from my point of view, I'm a bit frustrated with CAMHS, but then I had to like sit back and, you know, look at myself and think, okay, Robert, maybe have a bit more empathy and understanding what it's like for them. I mean, is it funding? Is it lack of staff? Or is it just the caseloads from the local authorities, from the charities, from the schools? So I think it's a number of things, man. But I mean, I'd like to know, because I don't know whether is someone to blame, or is it just, I don't know, the heavy caseloads of, or the amount of, I don't know, CP issues, or, I mean, the word autism, you know, the word ADHD, EACP plans. I think for me, that's what I want to know, is the EACP plans. How do these young boys, especially the males or the young males, how do they get undiagnosed or they get missed? But yeah, let's get into it. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, ladies.
Yeah, panelists.
Yeah, what's your?
I want to start with Zara, because Zara, you work for CAMHS. I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
So let's start with the acronym, what CAMHS stands for. So it's Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. There's a lot of, in terms of with CAMHS, there's funding issues, and which is widely known, government issues in terms of staffing issues, people that are actually trained and qualified to be mental health professionals. It doesn't matter what denomination, in terms of mental health nurses, social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists. At the moment, in the Tier 3, so this is community CAMHS, there is a lack of the staffing, the core staffing.
Right.
So this trickles down into services like myself. My service is a Tier 4 and we're equivalent to a hospital admission. So at the moment, we're getting a really high amount of risky young people trying to end their lives, sadly, emotionally dysregulated. Or at the moment, we're seeing a lot of young people developing a first onset of mental health psychotic presentations.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that contribute to this, and we have to think about the biological factors, the social factors, and at the moment there's been a lot. So COVID's been one, deprivation's another, the cost of living crisis is another, and it just kind of trickles and trickles. My service works in the community and we try to prevent hospital admission. So if we can, we will support a young person to avoid hospital admission, because we know if you treat young people with their mental health conditions in the home environment, their recovery is more successful.
Right. But can I just ask, Zara, so in terms of what you mentioned about, because last year, there was a post that I saw that it was quite astonishing about the fact that there's over 500,000 children and young people who are on the waiting list to actually, they haven't even been seen. Like the backlog is absolutely massive. And I did a post on TikTok and I was kind of saying that how actually my concern is that number by the end of last year is going to skyrocket, and it is. So because the backlog's always been there. So with everything that you're talking about in terms of COVID and the staffing, is that likely to change? Because also, as you mentioned, you've got early intervention, you've got children who are on child protection plans, child and need plans who are waiting to be seen. You've also got children in care as well, who haven't been seen. Is that likely to change, or are those figures going to continue?
Quick question though, before you answer that. So, is that in London or is it the United Kingdom in general?
It's a national.
It's national.
Okay,
right.
National shortage.
Right. So from your perspective, when we are speaking a lot, because the frustrations that tends to happen is that you always get, social workers saying, what's going on with CAMHS? Why is it CAMHS not taking them further? But actually, we don't see everything you've just said. We actually don't see that. Although we've got the pressure, it's good to get a CAMHS professional here to say this is what we're dealing with.
Or there's different aspects. So as there's like local authority. So I work for the NHS. So in terms of like the health versus the social aspect, the social care aspect, we try to work collaboratively. However, we have different perspective of what's going on. So we do have networking and professional meetings to discuss, who is responsible for what aspect of somebody's care. So for instance, if a young person or a person in general has been sectioned under the Mental Health Act, they're entitled to 117 aftercare. So that's funding under the social care funding.
Right.
For mental health, we would have to contact the social worker for them to kind of go and take the case to panel to get funding for additional services or support within the community. And then sometimes we get pushback about this, even though this is a thing that they are entitled to. So it just goes to show that I think a lot of services, NHS, whether it be social care, is stretched. The funding's not there. And we're stretched.
No. Deandra?
Well, from my experience, so I get a lot of the young people that get referred from CAMHS to our team.
Right.
And
what is your team?
So our team is called Sorted. So it's basically with substance misuse counselling, helping young people who either are suicidal, low moods, but also abusing different types of drugs and alcohol. So with our team, what we're meant to do is to provide those interventions to help them to either reduce their use and to also build the knowledge around their substance use, but then also to help them with their mental health. However, there's only so much that we can do as professionals because we don't have the mental health background to actually provide to them. So when we do things such as do the referrals for CAMHS then tries to bounce it back to us, which has happened multiple times.
Right.
So I'll just give a brief example. I had a young person, so she was open to CAMHS. They said because she's abusing substances, she needs to be referred to you. We took the referral and I did the work that I needed to. And then when it was time to re-refer or to pass back, CAMHS kind of blocked it and said, we can't take her back on. You have to provide the next steps. But there was nothing else that I could do to support that.
Right.
But I think it is because they don't have enough staff. Everyone else is probably not trying to take on roles with CAMHS because of the shortage. So that's what my perspective has been. So I haven't had a lot of success when it comes to my young people and CAMHS.
And how does that make you feel? Because I think as professionals, like all of us here, different agencies, you've got social work, education, you've got CAMHS, got everybody who's here, we would all be linked with each other anyway. But how does that make you feel knowing that actually, you know what, that there's pushback, but the pushback you're getting is not even because CAMHS don't want to do the work. The shortage and lack of resources is the reason why they can't do the work. So then there's a ripple effect onto you.
Yeah, it's frustrating because there's only so much that I can do. And the reason why I became a counsellor is because I want to help people to grow and flourish. And now that I've done my part and then I'm feeling like I have to take on extra demand, But if something wrong or something bad happens to one of the young people I work with, then what happens to me?
Right.
So it feels like there's not enough support. And then it feels like, what am I going to do for my young person now? So it is a big demand, and it's frustrating, and it can be really annoying.
Precious?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think my relationship with CAMHS is slightly different. I work for early intervention and psychosis service, so that we have had children who've been referred from CAMHS, and it can be a very difficult relationship, I think, and I think that's clearly a theme in this conversation. Clearly, it's because of just issues with the service in general, and I think obviously as everyone has said, it's a national thing. It isn't just a specific area thing. I think I guess just to speak on my service, we have our service works with people who are 14 to 65. So obviously that covers a very massive range, very different life stages and things like that. And when we do have younger people that come in, it's more of a joint work with CAMHS rather than us taking it on completely just because of health and safety and things like that. And we have psychiatrists on our team who work specifically in adult mental health. So they wouldn't be able to take on a child.
Right.
They wouldn't have any real contact with that service user until they reach 18. Right. So if we're doing joint work with CAMHS, it's mostly between care coordinators, psychologists, social workers.
Right.
You might have professional meetings and teams and things like that, but psychiatrists, for example, wouldn't be involved. It would be a CAMHS psychiatrist that would be leading that. But then obviously you have a psychiatrist as part of the service that has to keep abreast of the whole caseload, and there might be differences of opinions of medication, what is needed, that causes
I want to touch on that.
Some issues. So it, or even for example, there's been situations where you have a CAMHS psychologist who will take lead on that psychology, and so you have in, for example, our service, you have the care coordinator who will be in charge of coordinating the care in almost kind of not a standoffish way, but there is only so much they can do because that service user is not an adult.
Right.
And that clashes with things that are, carer interests, CAMHS interests, EIP interests.
Right.
So it can be a really difficult collaboration and joint working. And joint working can become a source of frustration on both sides because there's only so much jurisdiction you have on both sides.
Go on, Robin. I got one answer.
I think Precious has made a
fantastic point.
A good point, right? Yeah, I'll tell you the reason why. So there's a lot of young people I've worked with over the past. So I'm going to use autism, Asperger's as an example. Okay, right? Yeah. So as we know, there's a thing called meeting the thresholds, or meeting the criteria. Yeah. So local authority, for example, they might do an EHCP plan application. Right? Yeah. Professionals, whether it's like a mentor, could be a social worker, you work with a young person, male or female. Now, depending on the level of expertise, we might know this person has some form of autism or Asperger's because we work with everyone daily. We do training, we know the symptoms, the behaviour, whatnot. And then you do the EHCP plan, do the assessments, and then they don't meet the threshold. And you're thinking, what? So it's interesting how you're saying that, because obviously I think that's one thing. I think on the other side, the people on the other side, such as maybe the people doing the applications or the social workers or the mentors or the teachers, I think it's very much, because what is not meeting the threshold? Because another thing as well, right? Yeah, right? I keep hearing all these different labels, ABC, DFD, JJP, and then... and then when you get the paperwork back, it says it's a form of autism. And you're thinking, huh? I thought you said it doesn't meet the threshold. I thought you said it's not autism. Yeah. So there's so much...
But then, Rob, do you know what it is, though?
Yeah.
I think that's... What you just said, I think that's also down to who's actually doing the assessment.
Yes, as Precious said,
because I've worked a lot of cases with a lot of young people, and I've made a referral through to CAMHS, and then they haven't met the threshold.
Yeah.
And then what I've been able to do is that I've been able to social worker speak to the school. The school might have a budget to do an ed psych assessment, and then you re-refer it back because the education psychologist might be able to go and say that you know what, this young person, in terms of what we're viewing within their school setting and what their teachers are saying, that there's a threshold there that they do meet. So it depends really.
Yeah, but you know it's crazy. But you know it's crazy though, bro. So all right, so let's say you've got a young person in care. So they've gone through the borough. Yeah. Right, and it's been turned down twice by CAMHS. So CAMHS said once. They said once, nah, doesn't meet the threshold. Twice. Then the home or the school might pay for it privately. Yeah. And then bang. Oh yeah, they meet the thresholds.
I guess with that, it's the way things are kind of documented, because there's symptoms in terms of, like, as you were saying with ASD, autism, it's a spectrum.
That's right.
And symptoms and the way that functionality, it varies. So you have like high functioning people with autism, but they can hold a job, pay bills. But then you've got the other people where it is actual difficulty. So it depends on how much of a difficulty having the symptoms of autism or even mental health. So even if you think about it, because there's a comorbidity in terms of symptoms, so people can have more than one diagnosis, or have autism with depression and anxiety. They could have ADHD with depression and anxiety. So these are like mental health conditions as well. But
they're still high functioning though.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
it depends on how it affects their daily living.
What I want to ask Precious and Deandra is that, in terms of my line of work, being a social worker, you both mentioned about substance misuse and early intervention, in terms of your role. A lot of the times, and a lot of the young people that I've worked with, if they're misusing substances, one of the pushbacks, and I get why CAMHS would say it, is that they're unable to actually maybe assess a young person who might be misusing cannabis. Now, there will be lots of parents who are watching, because particularly the team that I manage is a children looked after team. And one of the things that I've regularly got from their parents is that they don't understand that even if their son or daughter is misusing any substances, why CAMHS can't go and do an assessment on them, or when it comes to medication, the feedback I've got from some of the assessors have said, well, actually, until this young person is not using any substances, any kind of medication, we can't, because we don't know if they're using substances, if they are going to go on any medication, what the side effects are going to be. So just from your professional expertise, are CAMHS right to be saying that, actually, you know what, if this young person is using a substance, but we know there's a level of need there and they need some form of medication, that actually it's not appropriate, because we need that young person to come off that substance for them to be assessed? What's your professional expertise? I'll start with you, Deandra.
So for me personally, I would say it depends how much that young person is using. So I have some young people are probably smoking about 15 spliffs a day. But then I'll have someone who's smoking probably maybe 1 gram every other day or so. So if they're lower use, obviously I understand that there can be an impact with medication and, smoking. I completely understand that. But if it's not excessive use, there can be some form of support, as long as they're working with another intervention, as like myself, to reduce and understand the risks. Then I think there can be support there. But if someone's over abusing cannabis, for example, then I wouldn't think that is the right time for them to be using or getting some support of medication, because I don't think it would actually work. And what kind of impact will that have on the brain as well?
Right. Precious?
It's a tricky one. I will say I'm not in CAMHS. So I can't completely say with a certainty how their procedures work and processes work. I will say, when it comes to psychosis, which is something that we do see a lot of substance abuse come into play, is that at least in EIP teams, medication will still be prescribed. But there will be things like physical health checks done quite regularly to see what's happening, because we understand that antipsychotic medication, the effects of antipsychotic medication can be affected by, for example, smoking cannabis.
Right.
So, but it's not a situation where we would deny medication if we see it's needed. I think sometimes the only time that the question might be used is whether or not it's drug-induced psychosis.
Right.
Because if it's drug-induced psychosis, medication isn't really going to be useful. You kind of need the drugs to wear out of the system.
Right.
See where they are, see if they improve and things like that. And that will just come by hospital admission. So it's difficult if that person is not in hospital, is in the community. You can't really... you can't account for that. So that might be a position in which where medication is probably not the most suitable.
Right.
You're trying to figure out what's happening there. In that situation, though, an EIP team probably wouldn't take on that client anyway, just because it's not an organic psychosis. It's not psychosis that's come through stress, psychological factors, biological factors, and things like that. It's drug induced, so it's a different relationship. But I guess kind of similar. I think if there is low usage, you know, medication being introduced is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it can be helpful. Obviously, you might have to work with, you know, we work with services like CGL. You might have to work with CGL figuring out how that's going to be measured and looked upon. If there is a lot, like heavy drug usage, for example, they wouldn't be able to engage in psychology. That's number one, because they're just not coherent enough. So medication would probably be paused as well. So yeah, I think there is a relationship there. So it makes sense as to why CAMHS might be a bit apprehensive, but I still think there are other things that you could do for that child outside of medication that I think CAMHS could probably take a lead on.
Sarah?
Can I say something?
Go on, yeah. I know. I can see you. It's you like, I want to say something.
That's exactly why I preference it. Like, I just don't know.
It's what we've got to remember is that with substance misuse, it kind of masks symptoms.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why you can't always prescribe for a symptom is because sometimes the substance causes the symptom.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
For instance, if you know you are an excessive alcoholic, like drink alcohol, it makes you low mood. It makes you depressed. This is one of the side effects of drinking alcohol. If you reduce your intake of alcohol, then it will be likely that you have the positive effect of increasing your mood. So if you're treating a person, first you have to think about the psychoeducation, getting them to understand, you know, what are the effects of cannabis on your body? How does this make you feel? Most people that smoke a cannabis now, if they don't smoke it, it makes them irritable. If they do, so they smoke it as a coping mechanism for symptoms that they have, in terms of some people smoke because they need to relax or they need to calm down. And this is kind of like a really big subject because you have people with undiagnosed
That's right.
like symptoms of ADHD, like hyperactivity, autism, and they think, oh, let me smoke because it helps me to be calm, but then it causes other symptoms and other things. So for instance, if you take that as a package in terms of we're going to refer this person to CAMHS, they're saying, okay, other services, can you get the person to understand, because they're smoking, they're likely to experience low mood. They're likely to experience irritability. Get them to understand this first. Get them to understand that it will be in their benefit to reduce and stop and have that onus on taking responsibility for themselves before you consider medication.
100%.
100%.
You know what's missing as well? So I go into a lot of schools, I do a lot of workshops, and for me there's a lot missing in the schools curriculum. I feel they need to like reteach sexual health and sexual education. But also, you know, you guys, we spoke about intervention, So as you said, it's about the young people understanding. So example, smoking weed. Some might watch Top Boy. I think, right, yeah, smoking weed's cool, you know, fam. Do you know what I mean? Right, yeah, but it's not cool. It has symptoms. It can do things to you. As you know, our young people, everyone's vaping. We're all vaping.
Yeah.
Right, I don't really go on the bus, but when I do go on the bus, right, right, everyone's vaping. Do you know what I mean? Right, yeah. And do they actually know what vaping does to their young body or to their minds? What it does? And
the parallel, like because a lot of people experience physical health.
This is it. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
I think. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, even like we've got to remember with smoking cannabis, some people they don't understand the chemical reaction, and when they're younger, it makes them susceptible to, as you were talking about, the drug-induced psychosis. The link between young people smoking cannabis and developing psychosis is it's evidence-based. It's a high prevalence, and you will notice that a lot of, and we will say, young Black boys and girls are being admitted under a Mental Health Act. Because of this, because they think, okay, smoking cannabis is helping them in a way.
It is a coping.
Yeah, as a coping mechanism. Can
I ask a question? got so much to say about, but I know we've got so much short time. So for me, like it's so when you think about weed, skunk, and different habitats of drugs, whatever or not, to a degree, it's very normalized right now. Yeah, it's a dysfunction to a degree, but it's very normalized for coping, because it goes in hand like with, I suppose, like mental health. So how do we overcome these barriers to a degree, especially like to like young people or even young adults or those with mental health? What suggestions do you think we could do more of?
But also as well, Rob, in terms of just keeping it towards CAMHS as well, with everything that you're saying, how are CAMHS going to be able to cope? Because actually, these are also, it's not things that we don't know about, but they're new emerging things that we're dealing with now. So what do you guys think in terms of how we are going to be able to cope with the pre-COVID stuff, the post-COVID stuff, and then the new emerging things that we're seeing?
So is everything money? Is it because it just comes to everything's money, you know, everything's, there's no funding.
Money is a factor.
Yeah.
Training is a factor, because I think we've got to remember the psychological element. Like psychology is important. Psychology is one of the most important factors of understanding how the mind works, understanding how you as a person relates to other people, understanding how your life is affecting you and managing stress. Psychology is a big aspect of things, because medication can only treat the symptoms, but you have to treat the symptoms plus the thing that your life, your the factors that contribute to symptoms. You can't just treat one thing and think that it's going to be cured or it's going to be better.
That's right. Precious?
I think it's a very tricky thing, because I agree. I think, obviously, I'm always going to be biased. I think psychology is super important. But the difficulty with it is that a lot of, when thinking about young people, a lot of young people aren't represented in psychology. There's not that many black psychologists.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a very difficult...
You need to run that back. That's like a big knockout punch.
There's not that
honestly.
many psychologists.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've had many a conversation with my parents. Like, why did you pick this career?
Wait. Why is that though?
Because so there's different types of psychologists, right? So you've got educational psychologists, forensic psychologists, clinical psychologists, occupational and business psychologists, counselling psychologists. So there's loads of them, right? But the psychologists that tend to work with the most people are clinical psychologists. It's incredibly difficult to get onto a clinical psychology doctorate.
Well, why is that though?
Because it's biased in its format.
Right.
I think they are trying their best to make it ethical and fair, but it is unethically skewed to middle class white women.
Right.
And so as a result, and even with men, there's not a lot of men on psychology doctorates. So there's even they're also underrepresented. Then put that forward to black men or black women, that's even smaller. I mean, I think I've been working in psychology since I graduated. That was 2016. I've met one clinical psychologist who is a male and who's black.
Jeez.
Right.
So when you look at I've met one clinical psychologist who is a black woman, and she is on my team currently. But it's so few and far between. So you do get a lot of young children who just don't see them represented. They're like, well, why do I need to go to therapy? Why don't I need to talk to this person?
The cultural competency.
Yeah, who doesn't understand me, who doesn't get that weed is part of my culture. Like, all my friends are doing it. And I think when it comes to just thinking about how do we manage cannabis use, it's a lot of psychoeducation, but it's psychoeducation that is done through community psychology.
That's right.
Through bottom upwards of like, okay, what is your perception of cannabis? What is your relationship to cannabis? How do we work with that? How do we formulate psychoeducation around your view, your cultural experiences, and being culturally competent, so that we're not just coming in, and saying cannabis is bad. And yes, cannabis is not great for you. It increases your chances of having psychosis. It increases your chances of anxiety and depression and all these things, right? It changes your neurochemistry. It's not seen as a drug, but it is a drug. So I think, of course, we understand that, but there's only so much you can do, because there is agency, there's free will, there's capacity. People are going to they need to have the right.
Drop us some gems.
Yeah, honestly.
That's what mental capacity is about. Is you have the right to make unwise decisions.
Yes,
right.
And it's frustrating as a practitioner. I'm sure everyone here has had that.
Right.
It's the truth, and it's there to keep people safe. So we I guess it's a long way around of saying, yes, we need that psychoeducation to let young people understand that, look, these are the risks. So they go in knowing the risks.
Yeah.
And if things go wrong along the way, then we'll try have these services to help hold your hand and figure it out when we get there.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's just having that cultural competency to give people a nuanced answer, a nuanced understanding of cannabis, because there is medicinal cannabis that helps people a lot. There's a lot of benefits to cannabis too in some ways, but I guess it's just understanding that unfortunately the benefits don't yet outweigh the negatives.
Yeah.
Cultural competency within CAMHS. Wow. Powerful, you know. I want us to come to Zara and then Andrew. Okay. All right. Any closing remarks from you, Zara?
No, I just feel like this has been a good conversation, but I have to give my apologies.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you.
then.
Thank you, Zara. Thank you, Zara. Thank you, Zara. Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
No, worries, no. But Deandra?
I was going to follow off of what Precious said, because representation does matter. So in my team that I work with, I'm the only black person on my team. Everyone else is either Asian or white. And then we have a small team. So when I've been put in the crew because I understand, and I say understand air quotes, I was told you probably understand these kids better.
Yeah.
Right.
I was put in Peru every single Monday to help these young people, to basically support them with their substance misuse. And beforehand, it used to be my manager, who is a white woman. She used to work then. The kids wouldn't engage with her properly. However, when I came into the team and I kind of took over, the engagement started to get higher and higher, because the young kids were like, you look like me, you understand me.
Right.
So there was a big difference. I was able to understand their background, you know, what's happening, like families and culture. So there is the need to have more of black therapists, counsellors or practitioners involved, because when you don't have that, a lot of the kids are like, well, you don't get me. And I've had that quite a lot. It's like, well, you don't understand me. Or if I go, they go, you don't get where I'm coming from. And they're like, you don't know about my lifestyle. I'm like, where are you from? And they're like, oh, I live in Harlesden, for example, or Church Road. And I'm like, okay, me too. And they're like, oh, really? And then you start connecting on that.
Right,
They
okay.
understand where you're coming from. And that happens all the time.
And
so, yeah. Go
on.
No, so that happened to me. Even like one of my kids, he was being groomed by a lot of older people. And then he was like, you don't get me. You sound like a really little, like a posh girl. And I was like, well, where do you think I'm from? He's like, you're probably like a West London kind of girl kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm not. And I was like, guess again. He was like, you're not Northwest. And I was like, I'm from Northwest. He was like, so you get me? And then he was trying to like question me, seeing if I really if I wasn't faking it. And then from there, we started to build a bit of a relationship, because it's the trust of, do you really know where I'm coming from? Or are you just a fancy lady that's trying to tell me what's right and what's wrong?
And I will just say it's interesting, because I think I completely agree with you. It helps a lot, but also I've been starting to realize there's actually a flip side to it that people don't realize. In my services I've had some service users who were like, so in my team, the majority of the people are black. Right, we have apart from the psychology team, I'm the one of the only two black people on the psychology team, but the rest of the team is mostly black. And I remember there were some service users who were talking about like some of the care codes that they have. They're from Nigerian backgrounds, and the service users was also from Nigerian backgrounds, but they kind of felt locked in to some of the cultural disadvantages because of that.
Right.
They almost felt like, you're going to side with my parents and what they think about X, Y, Z because you're older. Not only, yes, you might be Nigerian, but you're an older generation of Nigerian.
Right.
So you don't completely understand how it feels to be a first generation Nigerian or second generation Nigerian in this country dealing with X, Y, Z. So sometimes, in some ways, it actually can be a little bit of a hindrance for some people, because they almost feel like, because you're from a different culture, you have the onus to try and understand me and where I come from. Whereas if you're from the same culture, there's almost an implied knowing, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. Just because you're from the same place, that you understand my experience. So it's all about encouraging cultural competency, regardless of whether you are from the same place or not.
Right.
Yeah. You said earlier, because I know sometimes, depending on the referral and the circumstances, but I know sometimes you have to directly talk with the young person, right? Yeah, and you spoke about culture as well. So how do you provide that safe space? And as you said just now, their mum and dad might be from a previous generation culturally, whether it's Caribbean or African-wise. So how do you provide that safe space with that young person and trying to make them understand? And maybe, I suppose, as they may feel, they're not being stereotyped for how they look or how things are nowadays in this generation?
Yeah, I think it depends, because obviously in my job I don't work with young children in my role, but I have worked with young children before, and I think the biggest thing, especially when you see a child going through a really difficult time and trying to gain that, is giving them the space to not always say anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes people force. Oh, I have a question. I've got an assessment. I have to get through this assessment.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just about trying to understand the person, and it works with adults too, because even with adults, you know, they're walking around with their inner child. A lot of adults, when you're trying to get to know them, they're responding to you as if they would respond if they were at
That's right.
the age in which they kind of emotionally stopped progressing. So it's the same thing of trying to look past their diagnosis or potential diagnosis and trying to understand who is this person, and trying to focus on who they are as a person outside of the ADHD or the autism or the psychosis or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, what's your favorite color?
Yeah.
What show are you watching?
Yeah.
What's your pet
Yeah.
peeve? Like all of these things that helps them to be like, oh, I'm seen. I'm not here to just tell you I'm struggling, I can't do this. And trying to be more strength-based, focusing on what they actually can do and encouraging that. Then you can kind of, once you've built that trust, you can start talking about things that they might be struggling with. And then thinking about like, I guess encouraging that it's a joint venture. It isn't just, you're doing this wrong, you need to fix up. Is how can I help you? How can we figure it out as a team so that you feel supported? Because I guess for a lot of these children, they've never really felt supported.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trauma there that they don't feel safe, and they don't feel like this person, this adult has me.
Yeah.
If the ground falls out from under me, this adult's going to be the one that's going to have a net. To help
That's right.
catch
That's
me.
Do you know,
right.
it's so crazy. A young person said to me the other day, he says, "Sir, we're all a walking trauma."
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you know, I thought, Roy, like, you know, I had to take it in for a minute. I think he's actually right.
Yeah.
We're all a walking trauma.
But you know what it is, Robert? It goes back to what Precious was saying. With how the state of everything is, with CAMHS, and, you know, 'cause we've spoken a lot about thresholds, spoken a lot about, you know, interventions. With everything that's going on, we are kind of losing the human side and actually the kind of the direct work with those children, with those young people. And I think many that I've spoken to, you know, those they've been able to go into maybe the CAMHS office, they say that, you know, I'm just sitting there and it's just asking me kind of like generic stuff, not like what Precious is going to say, do you know what I mean?
It's very, it's how I feel about education. It's very business, right? Everything's business now. Like, the nurturing side has gone out the window now. Everything's business. Get the piece of paper, the robotic life, piece of paper, let's assess it, tick the box, move on.
But Rob, do you know what though? But it goes back to what Zara was saying. Even though we're saying this, because obviously for me as a social worker, I can go and, you know, I can go and say this. I can go and talk about the fact that, you know, it may be very business minded, it may be very tick box, but we also have to appreciate on our side as well that they are under a lot of pressure. They are. The backlog that they've got to deal with. So is that CAMHS professional? Are they going to be able to have the time? Because remember, they've got so many cases that they have to try and prioritize anyway. Do you know what I mean? So, like, in an ideal world, yes, what Precious is saying, she's absolutely correct. That actually they need to be able to go and have have that kind of human nurturing, get to know the person. But I just think, Rob, the state in which CAMHS at right now, they are so under pressure that they genuinely they do not have the time. Then you've got the issue in terms of what we were talking about, the substance misuse as well. So even if that young person does meet the threshold for CAMHS, but they're misusing cannabis, Precious said it earlier that obviously yes, it's about the cultural competence. Have they even got the time to even acknowledge that? Because they've just got like, this is about caseload as well for them. So they haven't like,
so,
do you know what I mean?
Right, so I want to ask you guys, okay, right, so I'm very big on solutions, and what else can we do? And I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, right? Yeah, so, all right, so in the UK, we have a habit of supporting other countries, and we were able to like find a massive amount of money and support other countries, right? Yeah, all right? And sometimes I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, we've got another pandemic in this country, homelessness, drug misuse, yeah? CAMHS is under pressure, right, yeah?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm just thinking, hang on a minute, how did you manage to make 2 million in 2 days to support another country? But in the United Kingdom, we have other essential necessities or issues that young people need help with, right, yeah? So what are the solutions in terms of funding? Do we need to sort of like, I don't know, have more, I don't know, what's something I'm looking for now? Partnerships with, I don't know, local authorities or school. What can the government do more? What are the solutions? What other ideas can we, to ease the help load or ease the caseload?
And to help CAMHS.
Would you suggest?
Well,
Possibly, yeah.
I'm thinking of it, but there's not. CAMHS doesn't have enough staff, right? And then also things like training wise, they don't have any of that. How about putting down the fees for training? Because it is expensive. People do need that because a lot of people are reluctant to go into CAMHS. Even I was reluctant to go working for CAMHS because I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. And I don't want to be stressed. But and then it's also
Sorry. See, because even I'm learning something today. What do you mean fees?
It's quite expensive for the training. It is quite expensive for training.
Okay.
But then also they have this other route as well, which is called a PWP, which is psychological well-being practitioner, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that might be is free, I think. Am I correct?
You get paid. Well, if it's from the NHS, you get paid to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can get paid to do it, and then you have to, I believe, you commit to the job role for like a year before you can actually leave once you've qualified. So they have things like that, but then a lot of people don't want to go down that path as well. So it makes it really difficult to kind of figure out what is the next solution because, like you were saying, we can find money for other things, right? And then what about what's happening in the UK?
Yeah.
Mental health, no one really takes mental health seriously. Even a lot of people, like you see memes online, like I'd rather pay for like my hair and stuff, so at least I'm okay and I don't care about mental health. People are glamorizing the fact that, I can do whatever I want. I can do, my mental health can be compromised as long as I look good outside. No one cares about what's happening internally. So until we actually as a society take it seriously, can there really be a solution for change?
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
I think a lot of it, obviously, yes, funding is super important because funding helps with getting more people in the door and getting workers. But I also feel like a lot of the situation of, with the government and things, I think that's a long-standing issue. Of how the general public sees the handling of finances, how the government sees the handling of finances, and I guess it's not really my jurisdiction to get into. There is definitely discrepancies there that don't make sense.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to how to help with services that are underrun, a lot of it is looking at the culture of the service.